wanted to get you to respond to this Caroline Leavitt clip.
When the president says Iran is very close to a nuclear weapon, is he relying on U.S. intelligence or intelligence sharing from an ally to make that assessment?
It is a fact, and the United States government maintains this fact that Iran has never been closer to obtaining a nuclear weapon.
Okay, so I mean, how many times have we heard that?
Well, let's say I've never been to New York, and like, this is the closest I've ever been to New York, and I'm thousands of
Right.
kilometers. I have been to New York, but I'm just saying,
Sure,
let's
yeah.
say you can say he's very close to New York. He's never been so close to New York before.
Right.
What does that mean? Does that mean that Iran is on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon? Iran is also the closest that it's ever been to sending a man on the moon.
Right.
But is Iran on the verge of sending a man to the moon? Of course not. This is, of course, nonsense. And I'm sure if you, in you're thinking about the recent interview or the statement that Trump made in response to a reporter who said Tulsi Gabbard just
Right.
recently said Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon, and he said, "I don't care what she said.
Yeah.
Iran is very close." It's obvious this is just manufacture consent,
Right.
and we saw that in the Iraq War. Remember the UN Security Council, the anthrax, and all those lies, which Colin Powell, to the end of his days, regretted, and
Right.
he helped. I don't want to, since someone who knows him well speaks. I'm not going to speak about him in particular, but
Right.
in any case, he regretted that role that he played in this war. So these are lies, and let me just very quickly go over a couple of things that may be useful to your viewers. One is that, um, of course, you've heard Netanyahu has been saying since 1990. I looked this up on Oopsie. The first time that Netanyahu claimed that Iran is building nuclear weapons, was close to nuclear weapons, 1992, and he said it's 3 to 5 years away. And then 1993, 4, 6, 8, and so on. He's been saying the same thing since. Sometimes say because Iran is months away. Sometimes I think once he said it's weeks away. And then sometimes he says it's a couple of years away from a nuclear. So that's Netanyahu, the serial liar. But some may say to you that okay, well, yes, he's a serial liar. Why did the International Atomic Energy Agency issue a statement against Iran just a while back? Now, regardless of the fact that the head of the agency just a couple of days ago admitted Iran is not producing a nuclear weapon, but the head of this body, this board of governors, is a political body. It's not a technical body. Their board of governors is dominated by the West, just like all international institutions that were created post the Second World War. The OPCW, for example, for chemical weapons, dominated by the West. And when you've heard Al McKay, I'm sure, explain this, that when they went to Syria, they said there's no evidence that the Syrian government carried the technical experts from the agency. They said that the evidence does not show that this was the Syrian government. And then what did they do? They sidelined the experts, and then they brought in their political people, their hacks, to write a report against the Syrian government. Why? Because the OPCW is controlled by the West. The IAEA has a board of 35 members. 17 of them are European and North American. So already they have then Japan and Korea are also on the board. They have the majority. And they all then with Argentina, which is the guy with the chainsaw, that's 20 countries out of 35. These 20 countries voted against Iran. So the West voted against Iran. China, India, they either voted against it or they didn't vote with the West. So the global South, which is the absolute majority by far, they did not vote for this resolution. So people who hear that the International Atomic Energy Agency voted against Iran say, wow, so the international community is against Iran. No, the West is against Iran. But the technical experts in the body have never shown any evidence whatsoever now in the past that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon. So that aside, there's a second question. And then I said, well, why is Iran producing enriched uranium at 60%? Iran doesn't need enriched uranium at 60%. It needs it at 20% for cancer patients. It needs it at over 3% for nuclear power plants. But why 60%? Obviously, they're building a bomb. No, I said this repeatedly during the nuclear negotiations that took place 3 years ago when I was their media
Representative.
advisor.
Advisor, okay.
Yeah, I was an advisor. Iran enriches uranium at 60% for leverage. Very clear, very obvious. They've said it, the West knows it, but they pretend this is not the truth. Why do they want leverage? Because if they don't have leverage, do you think that the West is ever going to remove sanctions against women and children? Look at Cuba.
Right, exactly.
The United States is strangling Cuba to death. They are they don't have electricity right now. People there are walk to work because there's no gasoline. And this is a threat to the United States, Cuba. As I said, they have removed all the sanctions from Al Qaeda and ISIS, that Syria, but they won't remove them from Cuba. Why? Because Cuba is independent from from the US empire. So does anyone think that if Iran sits down at the negotiating table with the United States and Europeans, that they will just remove the sanction? They'll never do that. So Iran has to have cards to play with to say, okay, you want us to get rid of this enriched uranium at 60%? Allow us to use the international financial system to import medicine,
Right.
to import supplies for medical uh, factories, for medicine factories, to import wheat. We can't do that right now. They know why we do uranium at 60%. They all know. But they pretend that Iran is trying to make a nuclear weapon. So they want Iran to give up enriched uranium at 60%. Now Trump said you can't even have it, which is Iran legally can have enriched uranium at 99%. There's nothing against it in the International Atomic Energy Agency regulations or the NPT. It just should not and cannot be diverted for military purposes. So 60% is within Iran's rights, and Iran can do it 99%. It's their right. But Iran does it at 60% to force Americans to eat the strangulation of innocent people, something which the Americans and Europeans don't want to do. And if someone, thinks, wow, the United States can't be that brutal, just look at Gaza. They're far more brutal
Right.
than you think. One of the differences between now and 10, 20 years ago was that the Americans, when they were the hyperpower, they were able to isolate Iran. It was very tough for Iran. During the war, of course, both the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc were behind Saddam Hussein. Iran was isolated. During the era when the single superpower or the hyperpower, as someone called it, it was very tough for Iran. But the United States, especially after um, Iraq and Afghanistan, and I think its neoliberal policies and removing the anti-monopoly laws and that sort of thing. The United States has been going downhill, and countries across the global south have been on the rise. Over recent years, conflict between the U.S. and Russia, you see conflict between the United States and China increasing. You see the United States at odds with many entities, and as a result, you saw the rise of BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which Iran has joined both. So today, Iran has lots of friends. 15 years ago, Iran was very isolated. Its friends were weak. They were afraid to cooperate with Iran. Now Iran is much stronger. Many of these countries are much stronger, and the United States is weaker. So, and after Gaza, the West has really marginalized itself a great deal. They're looked down upon across the world. So Iran is not isolated like it was in the past, and that gives it a lot of room for maneuver. Iran has good relations with Pakistan. It has good relations with all BRICS countries, China, Russia, Central Asian countries. And so it's more difficult for the United States today to strangulate the Iranian economy than it was a few years ago.
Well, at least there's that. And People should remember that message. Um, thank you so much, Dr. Marandi. Please come back on the show. We're so grateful to you and your generosity with your time.
Thank you very much for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you so much. The honor is all ours.